So good morning, everyone. I welcome you in next our interview during summer. I have here a very special guest. It's a second guest in our summer interviews. It's a Professor Jeff Martins from Michigan, from Detroit. Detroit. I have to introduce him a little bit because it's a very special scientist. I received his CV and it has 62 pages. So I have chosen maybe the most important things. First of all, I have to say that he received his Ph.D. in the University of North Carolina and Greensboro in exercise and sport psychology. Now he's a professor in exercise psychology in Wayne State University in Detroit, in Michigan. His research focus is mostly the physical activity, of course, disability, sport, body image, and distance running. He's also a distance runner, as I know it from Eva Prokešová. And he's also a teacher. He teaches exercise, sports, physical education, and health psychology. He published over 200 research articles and book chapters. And also he's an editor, also the reviewer of journals. He received more than 10 very well-recognized awards, many grants, of course. And the main area he is an expert at psychosocial aspects of disability and sport and exercise. So maybe that's the reason he has chosen the main topic of today's interview as psychology of Paralympics. So Jeff, welcome here in Prague.
Thank you so much for having me here, and I'm pleased to be able to talk a little bit about my research and about athletes and individuals with disabilities who participate in sport and exercise, and in particular the Paralympics, which will be starting in maybe 1 week.
Yeah, it's a very actual topic, so I am very glad that you have chosen that one. So I am not a psychologist, I'm a biochemist, so as you know. That's always surprising for me to have someone who understood the human mind, the psychology, the sociology, and so on. And the psychology of Paralympics or Paralympians, it's very something which I admire. So these people really needs to be admired, I think. But please, could you tell me what is behind this one? Why these people decided to do a professional sport?
Yes, well, the first thing I'd like to say is that Paralympians and many people with disabilities are quite similar to all of us, any other people. Mm-hmm. So often we forget that similarities are quite strong, and we tend to focus on potential differences or differences. So many of their motivations are no different than an Olympian. Mm-hmm. They're striving for personal excellence, to do the best they can do in a particular sport that's important to them. Mm-hmm. And of course, they would like to win a medal and set records and be the best in the world. Mm-hmm. But there are a few things that probably, from my perspective, make them stand out, and as you suggest, probably should be recognized for. Many people without disabilities who are striving to be Olympians often have a strong support system. So they have teammates, they have many coaches, they're able to access all kinds of facilities to train. But Paralympians often have to train by themselves. They don't have another elite athlete who lives close by that they can train with. So that's harder to be motivated often when you have to do it by yourself. Mm-hmm. Many athletes with disabilities don't have coaches, mm-hmm. and even some Paralympians don't, especially from countries that aren't maybe as developed as European countries or North American countries. So they have to learn how to coach themselves, and that's more challenging.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Yes, and simply accessing a fitness facility or sporting facility can be challenging too, because sometimes there may not be a ramp for somebody with a wheelchair, mm-hmm. or they may have to go to the restroom and the doors on the stall are too skinny, or the sink is too high or too low. So there's lots of things that we may not be aware of that they face on a daily basis that does tend to make things a little more challenging, especially if you're trying to train every day and reach a high level of excellence.
That's good. That's great to know it.
Yes.
So everyone needs support, so that's very important.
Yeah,
so,
and there's probably one last thing I would add before I finish my answer. Not all, but many people who we would consider able-bodied, who don't have a disability like a spinal cord injury, they often underestimate the capabilities of somebody with a disability. Mm-hmm. So they think that there are many things they can't do. And so individuals with disabilities can sense this, and so they often experience people who expect little of them, and who believe that they always need help and that they can't be independent. Mm-hmm. And that adds another layer of motivation at times to somebody with a disability to essentially prove, not only am I very capable to do things like go shopping or go down to the pub and have a beer, but I'm also so capable that I can perform at a really high level, such as the Paralympics, and win a medal. And one of the more interesting quotes I read that really illustrated the nuances of talking about somebody with a disability versus somebody without is a father's son returned from the war, and he had a disability, and his son became a champion marathoner in a wheelchair. And his father said, I'm more disabled than he is because I'm older, I'm not very fit, I can't walk far, I have heart disease. So he should be the one considered able, and I should be the one considered disabled. And so I think that really illustrates how people with disabilities, especially Paralympians, can be very fit and very healthy. And just because you're able-bodied does not mean you're healthy or fit.
Yeah, that's great. I'm always wondering if these Paralympians, if they have some special character, some strengths which we don't have, or some Olympionics, they don't have it. Is it possible to say that they have something special in their mind? Well,
I would think for somebody to reach the level of being a Paralympian, I would say that...
Or maybe they gain something because of their diseases,
their
handicap?
Well, there are a couple things. The first thing, I think for some of them, yes, we might be able to claim their level of motivation might have to be greater than even somebody who's able-bodied to reach that level because of the challenges they've had to face that I mentioned earlier in this interview. And the second thing is, many people who are Paralympians, they were not born with a disability, which is often referred to as a congenital disability like cerebral palsy. Many times they've suffered a very tragic, what we would consider a very tragic accident, a car accident, where one day it might be a young man riding his motorcycle and enjoying life as a 20-year-old, and then he has an accident, the next day wakes up paralyzed for the rest of his life. That is a very, very difficult mentally to overcome. And so in many cases, the disruption to your sense of self, your identity, your self-esteem is really hard. And so, as you might guess, many of those individuals might become depressed, anxious, angry, stressed out. And there's some research that suggests, looking at personality factors, that some of the changes in personality after a major accident resulting in disability, that some of those personality changes look a lot like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what many veterans from the war suffer from and have to manage. So to be able to to deal with that and to come out the other side and have an acceptance of the disability and having a healthy identity and sense of self-esteem means they've really had to cope well. And that can put them in a place where they've developed some coping skills that could be superior to somebody who hasn't had to face that. There's still a lot of research that we need to do. So some of what I'm sharing with you are some speculations and about some people, not necessarily everyone, but things that researchers, I think, would be, hopefully will be interested in looking at in the coming years.
It's a very interesting topic because we can learn from them.
Absolutely.
A lot of, because I think some emotions, maybe how to overcome some hard situation in our lives. I don't know how to do it.
Yes, it just occurred to me too, in addition to, I mentioned PTSD, there's also an acronym PTSG, post-traumatic stress growth. And that's and there's some research supporting this, that it's not unusual for after you become disabled to have that experience change your outlook on life, and in some cases you become a better person, a stronger person, a greater appreciation for the fragility of life, and more gratitude for the gift of life and the gift of every day being able to wake up and enjoy the world and family and friends. So there has been some, maybe half a dozen studies looking at how those bad things like an accident can be turned around and used as a source of growth and improvement. So, for example, is a small thing that we might find stressful. Somebody with a disability is like, well, this is really not a problem. I've faced real problems.
Yeah, that's very important to know that one. I have maybe one practical question.
Yes.
How to research these changes and maybe some improvements, and in general maybe some background, psychosocial background, which is behind these Paralympians. We have some tools?
Sure. One very effective way is interviewing, similar to what we're doing here. Having a trained expert interviewer in what they call qualitative research, ask many questions and record their answers, and have those athletes describe what they think, how they felt, what the experiences were like, and then sometimes even talking to maybe their teammates and their coaches, as well as family and friends. So that's a type of research where we consider the data are the person's words. Other research that you're probably familiar with and that I do a lot of has to do more with numbers and statistics. And in that case, often what we do is we'll have a number of questionnaires or surveys that we'll ask somebody to complete. And usually, if you do good research, those surveys have been developed in a very rigorous manner, so that we know the answers that somebody provides are what we would consider valid and reliable. In other words, they're a strong approximation of the truth in what that person's trying to share with us, and their reality.
That's very important.
Yes, and so psychologists have developed thousands of questionnaires, and sports psychologists have also developed quite a few that are often based in psychology, but also considering factors that are unique to sport and even the Paralympics, because the Paralympics in particular can be very stressful, because many of the coaches and the administrators and the country government officials, they want their athletes to win medals.
Of course. It's also big money inside.
Yeah, and that's true for Paralympians too. So they face a lot of pressure to try to be in the top 3.
That's fine. Okay. And what about women?
Women, yes.
Is it difficult to research them?
Well, it is difficult.
Especially the mood?
It's very difficult because at levels below the Paralympic level, because there's still, I believe, a strong gender bias that and a lack of opportunity for women who have disabilities. So, for instance, there's been times where I've spent a weekend at a wheelchair basketball tournament, and there might be 80 men playing wheelchair basketball and 2 women.
Oh.
So
the research sample is small.
Yes.
That's the first problem.
Yeah, that's the first problem. Yeah, so I think we need to do, as a society, we need to do a better job of providing opportunities and encouraging young girls with disabilities to participate in exercise and sport. And of course, the more we do that at the grassroots level, the more that should feed up into the higher levels, and then we can develop more elite Paralympians, female athletes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And what about, I mean, some normal people, not athletes, with handicap, with some disabilities? Could you recommend them to do some sport? So it's not necessary to do it on some Olympic level, but to do at least something?
Oh, absolutely. So we all know that physical activity is important for everybody for health reasons. So to help.
But how to overcome the first barrier? Maybe they don't know where they could call, come, who can ask.
Yes, so universities are great places. So first thing, yes, exercise and physical activity is important for everybody, including people with disabilities. And it's probably more important because people with disabilities often have chronic pain from their disability, and they have higher levels of things like heart disease and diabetes. So using physical activity to promote good health is probably even more important for somebody with a disability than somebody who's able-bodied. But of course, the opportunities are difficult. A lot of fitness facilities, even in the USA and Canada, are not built to be very welcoming for somebody with a disability. So they're not very friendly towards people with disabilities. If you think about lifting weights and the different machines that you'd use, and treadmills and bicycles. So a good resource is always the university in whatever town you might live in, and finding professors or people at universities that are advocates of exercise and people with disabilities.
Yeah, that they know the options where they can be sent or ask, call.
Exactly. And it's not unusual for, at least in the US and Canada, for local governments to maybe sponsor a baseball league for children with disabilities. And so they've even built a baseball diamond where they have constructed the field so that you could use a wheelchair. It's not grass, which would be very difficult in a wheelchair. And but the number one activity that is often enjoyed the most is swimming. So you can get in a pool, you can feel like you don't have your disability in many ways, and it's a weight bearing, and you don't really.
Or flying in a tunnel.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Eva is dealing with that one.
Yes. So yes, parachuting in a tunnel is another cool activity, but swimming, you don't have to do anything to the water to make it disability friendly. It already is.
Yeah, just to be immersed in the water.
Absolutely.
Because water supports your body and you aren't so heavy.
Yes, so you get great physical activity, and many people with disabilities say it feels like their disability goes away for that 30 minutes of being in the water, that they don't have it. They don't feel it maybe limiting them in the way it does on land.
That's good to know. But first decision has to be in their heads.
Yes.
Just to decide it, then call our professors.
Yes, I would say that the first thing to realize is that they're capable, that they can do it. Having a disability certainly makes it more difficult, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. But I think many people with disabilities are like people, able-bodied people. They still don't find the time or the opportunity to participate. We know from a lot of research that most people who are able-bodied and can just go out and take a walk, they don't, which is really unfortunate and sad.
I know.
Most people are sedentary and they don't take care of their bodies in the ways that will ensure good health into their 70s and 80s and 90s. So then they lose functional ability and they kind of become disabled because they're old, which is unfortunate because it doesn't have to happen that way.
Maybe I have the last question of our interview.
Sure.
Very important question. What you have learned from people with disabilities? What you have learned? What you gain from the research with these people? For you personally.
Yes, me personally, I think the number one thing is not anything specific, but I feel a lot of gratitude that I had people that supported me when I was a young professor and encouraged me to do this type of research, because not enough people are doing it. So in addition to learning things, I also hope that my work has gained some visibility across different levels of government and society and university and academics and sport teams and coaches, and has opened people's eyes to the idea that everybody can be physically active and participate in sport. And so that has made my career feel a little more meaningful and important, that I've been able to, I hope, make a small difference. And they've also, and then probably one last small specific thing is when I do this research and I talk to people, it also helps me understand that that many people with disabilities don't necessarily want to be viewed as being courageous, because they often think, well, I'm just a everyday person. But in all sincerity, I do think a number of them have to be courageous, and I've seen that in the challenges they face. And so in some ways that helps me deal with stressors a little bit better, because I realize I'm very fortunate to be healthy. Not to say they aren't healthy. Yes. Yes.
But in overall, the mind can be healthy.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And just because you're missing a leg maybe doesn't mean you're unhealthy. So I didn't want to convey that message. It's also an area that it's easy to unintentionally offend people with disabilities. But that's a whole another big topic that I don't necessarily think we have time for. So that's why if I seem to try to be careful with my words, it's because I do want to be careful and not be offensive to anybody, because they do face a lot of discrimination and people that either look down upon them or don't think they're capable or are uncomfortable because they don't know anybody with a disability. So that's why I want to be fair-minded in the words I choose and how I articulate my thoughts.
Thank you very much. I think it was a great interview with you. Thank you for coming.
You're very welcome. This is great that you wanted to have me share this, because this is how we can getting more information out about individuals with disabilities who are athletes and exercises. This is how we can help them.
Okay, that's great. I have learned from your interview that our abilities and our healthiness is burning in our head, and I think that's important for my future life.
Yes, a lot of it's in our head, and yes, as a psychologist,
we can do everything depending on our head.
Yes,
if it is allows. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Příště se setkáme v říjnu. Tématem bude létání handicapovaných a mým hostem bude doktorka Eva Prokešová. Těším se na vás po prázdninách. Nashledanou.